I'm not someone who scares easily. I grew up in a rough part of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I've been working construction since I was 19. I'm 27 now. I've been hit in the face with a 2x4. I've fallen off scaffolding, and I once had a nail gun misfire about 2 inches from my kneecap. Pain and danger don't really faze me anymore. But what I'm about to tell you isn't about pain. It's about something much worse. It's about the slow, suffocating realization that someone has been studying your life like a textbook and you had no idea. I should start with some context. About a year ago, I moved out of my parents' place and into my own apartment. It's a decent 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a small complex in Stratford, which is about 20 minutes south of Bridgeport. Nothing fancy. The building has maybe 16 units, mostly young professionals and a few older couples. The front door to each unit has one of those knobs that locks automatically when it shuts, so you always need your key to get back in. There's a little parking lot out front and a laundromat across the street. It's quiet. That's the main reason I picked it. After years of sharing walls with my younger brothers and listening to my parents argue about money, I just wanted silence. My routine at the time was pretty locked in. I'd wake up around 5:30, drive to whatever job site we were working, put in my hours, and usually be home by 4 or 5. On Mondays and Thursdays, I'd go to this gym called Iron House, about 10 minutes from my apartment. Tuesdays, I'd hit the grocery store on my way home because that's when they restock the deli counter and I could grab rotisserie chickens for cheap. Wednesdays and Fridays were usually just straight home. Saturdays, I'd do laundry at the place across the street, and Sundays, I'd go to my parents' house for dinner. That was it. That was my whole life. I know it sounds boring, but I liked the structure. I felt like I had control over things for the first time. The first time I noticed him was at the grocery store on a Tuesday evening in late September. I was in the deli section waiting for my chicken when I glanced down the aisle and saw a guy standing near the bread wall. He wasn't shopping. He was just standing there holding a basket with nothing in it, looking in my general direction. He was maybe late 30s, medium build, buzzed head, and he was wearing a plain gray hoodie even though it was still warm out. I didn't think anything of it. People zone out in grocery stores all the time. I grabbed my chicken, paid, and left. The second time was at Iron House the following Thursday. I was on the leg press when I caught a reflection in the mirror across the room. Same guy, gray hoodie, buzzed head. He was on one of the stationary bikes, but he wasn't pedaling. He was just sitting there with his hands on the handlebars, staring at the floor. I actually paused mid-rep because something about seeing him there felt strange. Not alarming, just one of those little blips your brain flags without telling you why. I finished my set and looked again. He was gone. I scanned the gym, but I didn't see him anywhere. I told myself it was probably a different guy. Plenty of people have buzzed heads and gray hoodies. That's not exactly a rare combination. I went back to my workout and forgot about it by the time I got to my car. The third time is when I stopped being able to explain it away. It was the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the grocery store. I was at the same store, same deli counter, same time. And there he was again. Same spot near the bread, same empty basket, same gray hoodie. This time, he wasn't looking in my direction. He was facing the shelves, but he wasn't reaching for anything. He was just standing there. I watched him for maybe 30 seconds, and he didn't move once. Not his hands, not his feet, not his head. It was like looking at a mannequin someone had wheeled into the aisle. A chill ran through me that I wasn't expecting. The rational part of my brain was still trying to write it off. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he shopped at the same time I did. Maybe he also went to Iron House. None of those things are impossible. But the feeling in my gut was saying something different. My gut was saying, this isn't random. I left the store faster than usual that night. I didn't even wait for the chicken. When I got to my car, I locked the doors immediately and just sat there for a second, scanning the parking lot. I didn't see him come out. I didn't see his car. I didn't see anything. I drove home and spent the rest of the night trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. The next Thursday at Iron House, I was on edge from the second I walked in. I kept looking around, checking mirrors, scanning faces. He wasn't there. I actually felt relieved, almost embarrassed by how worked up I'd gotten. I did my full workout, showered, and walked out to the parking lot feeling like maybe I had imagined the whole pattern. But as I was unlocking my car, I heard footsteps behind me. Not fast, not aggressive, just someone walking. I turned around and he was about 20 feet away, crossing the lot toward a car I hadn't noticed. Our eyes met for about 2 seconds. He gave me this small nod, the kind strangers give each other when they accidentally make eye contact, and then he got into a dark-colored sedan. I don't know what make or model. I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the fact that he had appeared behind me in a parking lot that had been empty when I walked out. I sat in my car and watched him pull away. He turned left out of the lot. I lived to the right. That small detail actually calmed me down a little. If he were following me, wouldn't he go the same direction? I drove home and tried to let it go. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't see him. Not at the store, not at the gym, not anywhere. I started to feel stupid about the whole thing. I even considered that maybe the guy had noticed me staring at him and thought I was the creepy one. Life went on. I worked my shifts. I did my grocery runs. I hit the gym. Normal stuff. Then came a Saturday in mid-October. I was at the laundromat across the street from my apartment, sitting in one of those hard plastic chairs, reading something on my phone while my clothes tumbled in the dryer. The laundromat was almost empty. There was one other person in there, an older woman folding towels near the front. The door chimed and I looked up out of habit. My stomach clenched so hard I nearly dropped my phone. It was him, same build, same buzzed head. But this time he wasn't wearing the gray hoodie. He was in a dark green jacket. He walked in, went straight to one of the washers, and opened it like he was checking on a load. But the washer was empty. I could see it from where I was sitting. He opened the lid, looked inside, closed it, and then walked to the next one and did the same thing. He did this to 3 machines before he stopped and just leaned against one of them with his arms crossed. He was maybe 15 feet from me. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the wall behind the row of dryers. But I could tell he knew I was there. There was something about his posture that told me he was aware of exactly where I was in the room. I didn't move. I barely breathed. After maybe 2 minutes of him just standing there, he pushed off the machine, walked to the door, and left. I watched through the window as he crossed the parking lot and got into a car, a dark sedan. He sat in it for at least a minute before pulling away. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every encounter in my head, trying to find a pattern. Tuesdays at the grocery store, Thursdays at the gym, Saturday at the laundromat. He was showing up at the places I went on the days I went there. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a schedule, my schedule, and he knew it. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't concentrate. I spent half the day pacing my apartment trying to figure out what to do. I didn't have any evidence of a crime. The guy hadn't spoken to me, hadn't threatened me, hadn't even approached me. What was I supposed to tell the police? There's a man who shops at the same grocery store I do. I'd sound insane. I decided to change my routine. I stopped going to that grocery store and started driving to a different one 15 minutes in the opposite direction. I switched my gym days to Wednesdays and Fridays instead of Mondays and Thursdays. I started doing my laundry at my parents' house on Sundays instead of the laundromat. I figured if I broke the pattern, he wouldn't be able to find me. It worked. For about 2 weeks, I didn't see him once. I started sleeping better. I stopped checking over my shoulder every 5 seconds. I thought it was over. It was a Wednesday evening in early November when I realized how wrong I was. I was at the new grocery store, the one 15 minutes away, grabbing a few things for dinner. I turned the corner into the cereal aisle and every nerve in my body fired at once. He was standing at the far end of the aisle, facing me, not pretending to shop, not holding a basket, just standing there with his arms at his sides, looking directly at me. And he was smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was tight and deliberate, like he wanted me to see it, like he wanted me to know. I left my cart right there in the aisle and walked straight out of the store. I was practically running by the time I hit the parking lot. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel the entire way. That smile is what did it. Everything before that I could have tried to rationalize, but that smile was a message. He was telling me that changing my routine didn't matter. He already knew the new one. I filed a police report the next day. I sat in the station for almost an hour describing every encounter to an officer who took notes but didn't seem particularly concerned. He asked if the man had ever spoken to me, touched me, or made a direct threat. I said no to all three. He told me they'd make a note of it and suggested I avoid engaging with the individual. That was it. I walked out of there feeling more helpless than when I walked in. For the next few weeks, I became obsessed with watching my surroundings. I'd check my rearview mirror constantly while driving. I'd scan every parking lot before getting out of my car. I started noting every dark sedan I saw on the road, even though I knew that was a common car and it was probably making me more paranoid. I didn't see him again during that stretch, but the absence almost felt worse. When he was showing up, at least I knew where he was. Then came the night that still keeps me up. It was a Friday, right before Thanksgiving. I had just gotten home from work around 4:30. I unlocked my apartment door, dropped my stuff on the kitchen counter, and went to take a shower. When I got out and walked back into the kitchen to start making food, I noticed something that made my legs go weak. My keys were not where I had put them. I always toss them on the counter right next to the microwave. Always. It's one of those little habits you don't even think about because you've done it 1,000 times. But now they were on the small table by the front door, next to a stack of mail I hadn't touched yet. I stood there dripping wet in a towel, staring at those keys, trying to convince myself that I had absent-mindedly put them there. But I hadn't. I remembered tossing them on the counter. I heard them hit the granite. There was no way I had walked them over to the table without realizing it. I checked every room, every closet, behind every door, under the bed. I even checked the bathroom I had just been in, which I know doesn't make sense, but I wasn't thinking clearly. The apartment was empty. Every window was locked. The front door had been locked behind me when I came in. I checked it twice. Nothing was out of place except those keys. I spent the next hour sitting on my couch with a hammer in my hand, just listening. I called my buddy Dominic and told him what was going on. He came over and stayed the night. I didn't sleep. The next morning, after Dominic left, I decided to install a cheap security camera outside my apartment door. It was one of those little wireless ones you stick to the wall with adhesive. I set it up so it pointed down the hallway toward the stairwell. I also bought a second one and put it facing my parking spot from my kitchen window. I wasn't going to let this guy be a ghost anymore. I wanted proof. For the first 4 days, the cameras showed nothing interesting. Neighbors coming and going, the mail carrier, a cat that apparently lived in the building even though pets weren't allowed. Then on the 5th night, I checked the hallway camera footage before bed and almost threw up. At 2:14 in the morning, a figure stepped into frame from the direction of my door. Buzzed head, dark jacket. He paused just outside my apartment and stood there for 11 seconds. I counted. He didn't look around. He didn't rush. He just stood there, perfectly still, facing down the hallway toward the stairwell. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out. I couldn't tell what it was on the grainy footage. It was small, maybe the size of a phone or a notepad. He looked down at it for a few seconds, put it back in his pocket, and then walked calmly toward the stairwell and disappeared down the stairs. That was it. At the time, I assumed he had been standing at my door before the camera caught him, like he'd walked up from the stairwell, stood in front of my apartment for who knows how long, and then left. That's what made sense to me. I didn't consider any other explanation. I called the police again. I showed them the footage. This time they took it more seriously. They said they'd increase patrols in the area and asked if I could identify the man. I told them everything I knew, which was basically nothing. No name, no clear face on the camera, just a build and a buzzed head and a pattern of showing up wherever I happened to be. It's been about 2 months since then. I haven't seen him again. Not once. No grocery store appearances. No gym sightings. No laundromat. Nothing on the cameras. He just stopped. And I know some people would find that comforting, but I don't. Because I still don't know who he was, what he wanted, or how he knew my schedule well enough to be waiting for me at a grocery store I had only been to 3 times. But here's the part that actually haunts me. The part I haven't told anyone except Dominic and now whoever is listening to this. After I showed the police the hallway footage, I became obsessed with reviewing every frame from both cameras. The hallway one was obvious. That's where I caught him. But the second camera, the one I had set up on my kitchen windowsill facing out toward the parking lot, I hadn't looked at as closely. I figured its only purpose was to watch my car. One night, about a week after the hallway footage, I was scrubbing through the parking lot camera from that same night. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. I think I just wanted to see if I could spot his car pulling into the lot before he appeared in the hallway. I was watching the timestamp count up, and I noticed something I hadn't caught the first time. The camera was angled through the kitchen window, which meant it picked up a faint reflection of the kitchen itself in the glass. During the daytime, you'd never notice it because the sunlight washes it out. But at night, with the parking lot dark and the microwave clock giving off just enough glow behind the camera, the window glass was basically acting like a dim mirror. You could see the vague outline of my kitchen counters, the shape of the fridge, the edge of the hallway entrance. It was blurry and faint, but it was there. I almost skipped past it, but something in the reflection caught my eye at a timestamp about 40 minutes before the hallway camera recorded the man standing at my door. I paused the footage and leaned closer to my phone screen. In the reflection, near the entrance to the hallway, there was a shape that didn't belong. It was darker than the wall behind it. It had a width to it, like shoulders. I stared at it for a long time, telling myself it was a shadow or a jacket I'd left on a chair or some trick of the low resolution. But I don't own a coat rack. I don't hang jackets in the kitchen. And I went back through earlier footage from that same camera, hours earlier in the night. And the shape wasn't there. It appeared at 1:41 in the morning and stayed perfectly still for over 30 minutes. Then, at 2:12, 2 minutes before the hallway camera picked up the man stepping out of my apartment, the shape shifted and moved out of frame toward the hallway. He was inside my apartment, not outside it, not in the hallway, inside my kitchen, standing in the dark while I was home. While I was in my bedroom, probably half asleep, he was one room away, standing motionless in my kitchen like he was waiting for something. I checked the hallway camera from earlier that night over and over. No one walked down the hallway toward my apartment before 2:14, not once, which means he didn't come from the stairwell. He didn't walk up to my door from outside. He was already inside. I don't know how he got in. The windows were locked, the door auto-locks, and yet there he was in the reflection, a full 30 minutes before he ever appeared in the hallway on his way out. The hallway footage that I thought was the scariest thing I'd ever seen suddenly became the least scary part, because that footage showed him leaving. The reflection showed me that he'd already been inside, that he'd been standing in my kitchen in the pitch dark, doing nothing, saying nothing, just existing in my space while I had no idea. And the thing that really breaks me, the thing I cannot stop thinking about no matter how hard I try, is that the only reason I know about that night is because I happened to install a camera 5 days earlier. He had been coming to my door. He had been showing up at every place I went. How many other nights did he stand in my kitchen while I slept? How many times before I had a camera was he right there, just down the hall from where I was sleeping, and I just didn't know? I moved out of that apartment 3 days later. I didn't even finish the lease. I changed gyms. I traded in my car for something different. I don't follow a routine anymore. I randomize everything. Different stores, different days, different times. It's exhausting to live like that, but I don't know what else to do. The police never identified him. There were never any arrests. I still don't know his name, how he got into my apartment, or what he was doing standing in my kitchen in the dark. But the question that keeps me up at night isn't any of those things. It's simpler than that. The camera only caught one night. I lived in that apartment for months before I installed it, and every single one of those nights I slept with my bedroom door open.